The reason that secular governments are involved in marriage, at least traditionally, until about 10 minutes ago, marriage between a man and a woman, wasn't just a religious aspect. It was because the marriage of a man and a woman perpetuated and stabilized society.
I'm a certified life coach, and one of the biggest things I'm dealing with right now are a lot of relationships, because that seems to be a big thing a lot of people have issues with out there. And one of the scriptures I know talks about let no man tear asunder what Christ brought together, and I believe that's referring to marriage, if I'm not mistaken. The thing is I don't think all marriages are from God, and in that regard, do all marriages have to honor what's in the scripture?
Do you mean as a Christian?
As a Christian, or even not even as maybe both people aren't Christian in the marriage.
Why do you ask that question, Manny?
Well, because, I see people coming to church, like I'll see a lot of men or women coming to church, their spouse, their significant other, whether it's a fiance or somebody they're married to, never shows up. And then, they're really into it. They're coming to services, they're serving and whatnot, and then maybe a year down the road or two, they disappear. They fall off the, and then like I'll bump into them later on somewhere around, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't go anymore. And it's like, oh, my significant other is pretty much doesn't go with me, so I don't go, and they just tend to drift away from going to church and, believing or serving God or whatever the thing
Paul
is.
talks about this in 1 Corinthians 7. If you're in an unequal relationship, you're a Christian, the other person isn't, and the other person leaves, abandons the relationship, then according to Paul, you can let that person go and you're free to remarry. But if you're in a relationship and that person wants to stay in the relationship, then you need to honor those vows and stay in that relationship, barring a significant exception, like adultery or severe abuse. In fact, Wayne Grudem came out with a paper in 2019 saying there may be another exception based on a passage in 1 Corinthians 7 other than just abandonment or infidelity, extreme abuse, he says, because the way Paul writes one of those passages, he says, in cases like this rather than in one case. And so Grudem has an article on that. You can look it up and see if you agree with him online. Grudem.
I don't believe Paul says he's already married.
Hold on, sorry, I can't hear you, and we got to keep going.
I think he was saying that Paul, what were you saying?
I don't believe Paul says he can't get married.
So if you're in an equally yoked relationship, and then you fall apart, let's say, for example, you want to go to service, the other person's telling you, no, you can't go, and trying to hold you back from doing it, and then you decide that, hey, you know what, I'm going to bail and get out of the relationship. Are you free to go ahead and remarry as the Christian who got out of that relationship because...
If you're not the offending party, if you are the offending party, you can't get remarried, as far as I understand it. Now, our friend Mike Winger has done how many hours on marriage?
A whole series. Who knows?
If you want to get into all these different circumstances, he's got on his Bible Thinker YouTube channel several videos on
divorce
marriage,
and
Christian marriage, that kind of thing.
All the things.
Now, from the perspective that Christopher was talking about before with regard to marriage, the reason that secular governments are involved in marriage, at least traditionally until about 10 minutes ago, marriage between a man and a woman, wasn't just a religious aspect. It was because the marriage of a man and a woman perpetuated and stabilized society. That's the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with. Why does the marriage recognize, or why does the government recognize a man-woman relationship? Why doesn't it recognize other relationships in that same way and privilege it? Because that relationship is unique among all other relationships. Without it, you don't have civilization. Yeah. And my main problem with so-called same-sex marriage is it makes marriage genderless.
Yeah.
So if marriage is genderless and it's just about the romantic desires of adults, then there's no view in the law or the law's a great teacher. The law doesn't teach you that marriage is really about perpetuating and stabilizing society. It's about procreation. That's the essential reason the government's recognizing your marriage. Sure, some marriages don't have children, but that's the exception rather than the rule. The rule is a marriage comes together to procreate and bring forth the next generation. That's the reason government's involved in marriage. And when we start toying with that, we're toying with the foundation of civilization.
Okay. Way cool.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, man.